before, and it's probably none of you. I often question the phrase. It's a really good phrase, and I hope it catches on, and I sometimes figure the way that we've jammed sec right into the middle of the happy couple of DevOps sometimes comes across a little like that. You see, I've seen a lot of first-hand transformations from waterfall to agile, from agile to DevOps, trying to get high-speed security into this world, trying to take some of the tools of the past and just kind of cram them kicking and screaming into our new development lifecycle and new culture. And it's interesting. This is kind of the context around me or I should say Michael, making me reverse this and apply my experience to my own company, which I hadn't up to this point done. So this is kind of how it went down. Back in April, we went to an awesome sushi place. And he said, I'd like to show how the secure SDLC works at a vendor, like by example. And I was like, that's an awesome idea. I agreed right away. I'll do that talk. I'm the guy. So this is kind of where we play in this whole new space, trying to look at ways to secure it. And I'll talk a little bit more about the architecture of that so it's clearer, because using a lot of the other vendors were talking about using their own tools on themselves. And we do that to an extent, but it's just kind of different, right? So I'll have to explain how that works and then the other things that we use as well. And then I'll actually show you what our CI environment looks like. And if you caught a sneak preview of it up there, it's fascinating. But when I dove deep into the company, right, let's take a look at the company. There's me down there. That's the guy I need to speak to. It turns out that's the guy I need to speak to over there. I know his real name, but I'm going to call him Brent for now. That's John up there. I need to talk to him. Those two guys at Aqua are very, very hard to get a hold of. They're extremely busy. It turns out Brent there, everything goes through him. Who knew, right? He's in charge of our CI. He's in charge of DevOps. He's kind of this sort of single point of human failure in our company. And that's the truth. I'm not telling you his real name. Go on LinkedIn, you'll probably figure it out. And our security guy is just going crazy at the moment. I mean, just to get 5 minutes. My conversation with them, in depth, happened this Sunday. It took me months to get that appointment. Oh, and by the way, while we're here, I might as well introduce the rest of the team. There's Jane. She's the back corner. There's Grace. Oh, where's Grace? There she is. She's over there. But there were shocking parallels, if you haven't all figured it out based on the book thing. That's the Phoenix Project picture, right? It was so close. This is our CI environment here. So this is going to be shockingly revealing. That's why all the suspense. But more importantly, a marketing slide. So this is kind of what we do. Images, if you're in microservices and you're working with containers, you're working with images, you're kind of going to go from this side to that side. You may do it multiple times if you've got development or staging or production. There might be promotions from one to the other, but roughly you're going to have some kind of build, ship, run, Docker-esque SDLC going on. You might be using some of these things. For CI, we use Jenkins. We're big fans of Jenkins for some reason. You'll see that. You'll definitely see that. But you can integrate with all these things. We have everything we release is in containers. We have a scanner container. It's very easy. You run it up. You say, use this container, scan that container, tell me everything that's wrong. Simple. So you can stick that as a one-liner anywhere. If you've got a registry, you can give that to us and we'll show you how bad it is. That tends to be what happens when we do POCs with customers. That's the first thing they do. So that's kind of good. And we can verify that what you did there is also there. And then when you go into here, we can verify it's the same thing the whole time. And now you're up and running, and we have all sorts of interesting things we can do at runtime with running workloads to make sure that you have what we'll roughly call runtime immutability. So whatever it is that you start up is the only thing that ever starts up, which is pretty powerful. Because if you think of different attack vectors, it's tough to come up with ones that don't require, well, A, if they get into your system, actually know they're in a container, for one. Then they start to do things that are not very containery. And that's very easy to characterize and determine. If they try and move east-west, all of these behaviors of traditional attack vectors are very easy to characterize when you're running simple microservices in an orchestrated runtime. So it kind of changes the way we look at security a little bit. So this is what we do. We have a very simple product, and we have one product. That makes us a little shorter of a presentation, I suppose, because I don't have to tell you about 4 or 5 or whatever. And we have 4 primary containers. One is probably the one we concentrate the most on. That's a server/REST API, but that is designed to be internal and for use by you. So it never faces the outside world, and never face it to the outside world. I can tell you about that. The Aqua Gateway is just a communication aggregator and a communicator to the Kubernetes API, and we have enforcers that operate in different ways on your pods. We also have optional scanners that pop up either here within your cluster, or you do it on your own in the CI environment. Same container, doesn't really matter. 4 things, that's it. Pretty straightforward. In terms of deploying it as an application and testing it for security, it actually deploys in your world. So, and then you use it to secure your world. So it sits kind of in the back as a trusted security advisor within your Kubernetes environment. So to test it, securing it is a weird inception thing going on there. Anyway, we do that. All right, let's talk about some boring stuff about stats. We release weekly. Something that I get to do that I didn't get to do at previous companies is our weekly sprints from R&D are small enough that it's on Zoom. I can zoom in and I can sit there and I can just be a fly on the wall and I can watch everything they talk about. Look at features, look what bug fixes were happened. I get to see everything. That is very revealing, particularly when I care about a particular bug fix, or I would like to know what's going on in a granular level of detail. I don't sit on all of them, I don't have that kind of time. But it's nice to know that that is available. So I did sit on a few of those to try and get a bit of an education. That was quite cool. So we do have releases every single week, and we need to. The reason we need to is because when we release our containers, we released our last one in June. It was version 4.2. It took until July before it had a high priority CVE against it. And we have a policy of no high CVEs in any of our containers, and yet, boom, it was there. And what's annoying about Aqua is that we scan ourselves, so if you're using it, we get no end of calls of people phoning up going, yeah, I got a high priority CVE, it's in your container, dumbass. And like, it happens, wait a week, the new sprint will fix it, and it will be out, if there is a fix. And we have a bunch of other compensating controls against known CVEs that we release along with Aqua to do it the way we enforce policy to stop unfixable CVEs from being exploited. So that's a whole other thing. Talk to Jane if you want to learn more about those things. But we have quarterly major releases and we have yearly major releases. So we're at 4.2 now. Go figure, we've been around 4 years or so. So we have 4.5 coming out soon. So that just gives you an idea how fast we're trying to develop. It's pretty DevOpsy, almost to a sloppy level of DevOpsy. Maybe those go hand in hand, right? And so here's kind of what's happened over those past few years. I didn't put any numbers on this because the bars kind of apply to anywhere. Like we've been I can't believe how many HR we've hired. I mean, that's a topic of conversation. I was telling some people I started in March, and you guys. Now that I think it was 120. I don't know. Jane might know, but now we've crossed 200 a few weeks ago. So now people look at me like I'm the guy, because I've been around forever. But what's interesting about this, when you look at R&D, and after I'd beaten them up for a few hours on Sunday, they reluctantly admitted we're still kind of here. Because while we were frantically trying to get feature parity with competitors and make sure everything was cool, and when we're very security focused. I mean, our hiring policies on having people who have some security coding knowledge is pretty high, and and I'll talk about that in a bit. This bit here was unexpected, because it's like kind of cloud native matured, and suddenly things like Aqua as a security tooling really caught on, and the population went boom, and suddenly everything went busy, and suddenly poor Brent is completely snowed, and he admits, well, we're kind of behind on the scalable infrastructure thing for not just our CI, for security, for everything, which is why they didn't respond to me for like a few months. They were hoping actually they could kick something into place that would make us look cooler before I had to do this. Until eventually they broke down at the last minute and went, you're going to have to do it the way it is. So, to the outside world, we look like this guy. After this talk, yeah, my conversation. So I've cut and pasted some of this. We have Teams, we use Microsoft Teams, but just for illustration, easy question, how do we secure Aqua? This is from Brent. What do you mean? Aqua, how we do, security in mind, automation, that's a lot, hit me. The product, SDLC, DevSecOps. And it's kind of he severed ties with me at that point. We got to May. We got to June. I thought I was off the hook in June because we scheduled a conference and then I wasn't going to have to do this talk. And I told Michael someone else was going to do it. And then come July, I had to do it again. And then I sent another message. I'm like, no, really, you're all going to look real bad if I don't know how to do this. And then somehow, Michael said something about it, and it got out in our community. And my associate in Germany sent me a message that said, oh my God, you got them to tell you how you do this? And I'm like, not yet. I will. And then I sent them this image. I'm not going to necessarily burn the place down if they don't tell me about their DevSecOps, but I just wanted to let them know that I'm going to go up here and present something. I'm not going to not present. So it's probably better we work together and actually just be honest about where we are in terms of the way we develop our code. So he started to relent a little bit and said, who wants to know? So I said, Michael Mann wants to know. In which he said, the guy who did the Black Hat movie? I said, no. Not that guy. No, the DevSecOps guy, Michael Mann. Anyway, and I said, maybe around 200 other people who might be here. I don't know. And he said, okay, we should talk. So he sent me kind of a list and said, where do you want to start? This, when we first started talking about it, is the order of operations that we started to apply security to our world. We started with policy, specifically SOC 2, and then we decided to have an education program early so that even the developers didn't know what they were doing, had an understanding of what security was early on. When you only had 5 developers, it was easy. You just say, everybody, don't make insecure code. We'll use the tools we can to make that happen. And once you establish a culture of 5, it's easy when you get 6. So it's actually, we've got a group of pretty switched on guys and girls doing all of our coding there. So it's not too bad. We do have our CISO. He's pretty good with risk analysis and threat modeling. We made an architectural change recently to go to gRPC, and that was his doing because he worked out there was a problem with the way we're doing things currently. So you see these architectural changes, which are a result of the quarterly releases that we do. And it's important. It's important to know that this stuff is happening to make sure that the way we deploy in your application, we can't then become the weakest link. That's really embarrassing, right? We acknowledge autonomy in our developers. We don't bug them. We don't even make them use the security tools. We have it all in the CI. We recommend, but we understand that at scale, we're never going to force everybody to do everything, right? So autonomy is a given. Hot on automation, whether you approve of that automation, I don't know. It's interesting, having seen some of it. We like Atlassian, so we use most of the Atlassian stuff. We use Confluence for discussions. We use Jira for tickets. Anything except Bamboo. For some reason, we love Jenkins. I don't know. We really love it if it's free. We started off as a startup, and we went all free stuff right from the start. And we kind of, except for ourselves, we probably wouldn't even use us if we had to pay for it. We use everything free. We have Microsoft as an investor, thankfully. That's why we're using Teams. And we get, a lot of assistance with the cloud from Azure, and we have deals with AWS, and we have deals with Google, and pretty much every possible cloud platform we have at our disposal to play with, which is awesome. The SOC 2 thing, SOC 2, everyone gets SOC 2 is like a lot of this. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing everything great, but it's a great start because you get all your policies nailed. The important ones for me really and for this are those little ones down there, all this stuff. And this does apply, but the little secure SDLC one down there and the security awareness and training were relevant for what I was digging into. So I'm going to pause there. I'm just going to talk about that automation backbone a little bit. So we're at last in, we're Bitbucket. I didn't mention that. So all of our code goes into Bitbucket. Pull requests into Bitbucket will then launch all sorts of CI process that do just about everything. And I'm going to give you a little look at it. I'm not going to really touch it because it'll be the real one. And I could cause a lot of havoc if I just start clicking. Worth knowing that this is probably a strange list of core development languages. We do a lot of scripting, and we check it all. We consider Dockerfile a language. Why not? We write these massive Docker files all over the place as we're containerizing not just our releasable product, but other things within the company. Golang is our favorite. So let's add that guy. And we use JS for front end. I can't remember who said they're switching from Angular to React. I think we're switching from React to Angular at the moment. But yeah, so those are our primary development languages. And in order to get some form of security within these languages, we kind of had to go outside the box a little bit. So for our shell scripting, we use shell check. Are you aware of shell check? It's pretty cool. Yeah, nice, fans. It is awesome. I just in case, I threw a code up there so you can scan it and then go use it. And it's really cool because there's like an online version, so you just want to see how bad I am at shell scripting. It's pretty bad. It just gives you all sorts of inline information. It's really, really handy. So everything we do goes through there. We also do Haskell, Docker, Linter. I don't know if anybody ever tried that. It's almost the same as in fact, it uses shell check for embedded shell scripts inside Hitalint. So you kind of get 2 in 1 if you're using Hitalint. And just to give you an idea, it looks just like shell check. So you get all these different tips on making a good Docker file. And people are notoriously terrible in making Docker files. I mean, I work on lean Docker files mainly, like introducing the idea that if you've got a base image, and you can remove things from the base image. Like you don't just have to add. You can get something that's almost there and then pull all the junk out that you don't need, and then add the things you want to need. Like that makes you a lot smaller and a lot less vulnerable. So, but that plus this is really quite powerful. It's very cool. And of course, GoSec. There are bigger offerings that do Go now. There wasn't that long ago. Checkmarks guys gone? They're gone. Awesome. But they do Go, right? You got to pay for that. We're not there yet. Maybe in 2019 in the future. But GoSec's pretty good. I have no doubt. They have the sort of rules, if you're not familiar with GoSec, that you would be familiar with. I'm not going to go through them all, but all I wanted to do was just sort of give that ring of familiarity when you zip through them all. It's pretty good. And if you're using GitHub or something like that, only GitHub at the moment. You ever use Guardrails? Guardrails is awesome because you can just plug it straight into your GitHub and it'll run GoSec, it'll look for secrets. It takes a lot of all the effort out of all this kind of stuff. And it's super free and super easy to use. Oddly, we don't use Guardrails. I do. We're in Bitbucket. It doesn't work there yet. We want to use Guardrails, so we're trying to push them to get toward Bitbucket at the moment. But we're using all the things that they do, we just do it on our own. And when in doubt, our Brent loves to reinvent the wheel and create some complicated CI process that's going to make it happen for us. So getting to the end, just kidding, a little bit more. We use Aqua. We have to use Aqua, obviously. That would be insane if we didn't do that. And I didn't say that we are an industry leader in image scanning. There's a lot of other image scanners out there. Claire's been around for ages. We just actually brought into the Aqua family a free one called Trivi, which is really good as well. So, and we're going to continue developing that in parallel with our own and merge all of those good things together, which is pretty awesome. So I highly recommend go to github.com/Aqua Security. Lots of free stuff there. Some of the things that we do there are just almost like prototypes for what we put into the main product. Like Kube Hunter is something that scans Kubernetes orchestration and tells you all the dumb things you did. Particularly if you're doing it the hard way, you're probably going to mess something up. But there's a lot of other things, like benchmarks for CIS. There's a really good new tool out there called kubectl. I always forget. It's really hard to get a hold of, figure out what permissions you've granted in the Kubernetes API. kubectl who can. So you just use it like kubectl, but you put the thing you were going to do, and instead of doing it, it tells you who has the ability to do it. It's really hard to reverse that permissioning. So we've got a little tool out there that reminds you how you kind of messed up your permissions. So that's another really cool thing that's out there that we're always contributing back. And I think it's worth noting, when I'm bigging up Aqua, of course, that if you know Liz Rice, a lot of you do, she's heavily involved in the community. We're not kind of just reacting to cloud native and containers and orchestration. We're leading in this area in terms of getting involved in CIS benchmarks, being a part of the CNCF. All of this stuff is coming actually through Aqua, big fans of that. Getting back to this. We've already seen the dog eating his own food. Of course dogs eat dog food. I don't know why that was a weird slide. But for good reason. I mean, we sort of are self-securing. We have CI integrations so that we can break our own build. In fact, this is why the NDA was there. This is a base policy. You can see some of the things that we've got in our break build policy. No high severity vulnerabilities. If certain vulnerability score doesn't get through, you can sort of see over here, we have approved base images, we have a CVE blacklist, we have all sorts of things that we apply that we do not allow images to go through and become part of your world if they don't pass this policy. And it's actually a little bit more strict probably than what we would recommend organizations use, but it's our policy, and we're a very small company, so we can get away with something that's a little bit stricter than normal. But we do have quite a strict policy for the way we build images and the way we break them. And that actually makes us pretty secure out of the box. Now, I mentioned earlier, the reality is, this is our Aqua Enforcer agent running in my demo environment. It is not completely devoid of high CVEs. Now, how did that happen, right? Well, this is the one that just messed us over and had to be removed in a sprint. So that's gone now, but it isn't in my demo environment. But it's the only one that has a fixed version. So the rest of these have been acknowledged. If we go back and look at one of the little tiny tick boxes that's here, we exclude the ones that don't have a fix available. There's not much we can do about it. What we have to do then is, thankfully, we have a research team that's really good at cloud native CVEs and looking at them and making decisions about whether they're exploitable or not. So we accept that risk, we publish them, and then we deploy. So I think it's worth noting that this is kind of the world we have to live in. It's very difficult to have an application out there running in production that is 100% squeaky clean, even at a vendor when we're trying to kind of lead by example. So somebody mentioned DAST earlier. People still do DAST, right? Everybody knows that. It's all over the place. We actually use OWASP Zap. Our head of security is a massive OWASP Zap fan, turns out. And turns out he knows our application really well. So he is one of those guys that has programmed Zap in our CI to blast everything all the time. And he's doing a really good job of using Zap. And he's like, when he told me that, I thought, I'm going to ask fans of OWASP Zap, enough. It's not bad if you know how to use it. If you've never used it before, it looks like it was written in 1988, and it's kind of, if somebody mentioned you push the scan button, you expect it to do something. That's kind of what it's like. It needs some tweaking, it needs some tuning. But we've done a really good job on it. So I thought I'd throw out there and throw a bit of love at OWASP Zap. So I'm going to take a step back. And no one did any demos, which was interesting. Nobody showed anything live up to this point, right? It's all fine. So let's talk about Jenkins. I said we're big Jenkins fans. Our Jenkins environment is a beautiful Rube Goldberg machine operating in perfect synchronization and harmony that never, ever breaks. except this Wednesday when Brent broke the licensing machine and all the licensing stopped working, but it was fixed very quickly. Very quickly. That little bowling pin was a little ajar off the kilter there, and things went wrong. But for the most part, it works like a Rube Goldberg machine that's inside a Sharknado. But it's pretty good. Now I could do this, and I could show you kind of what it looks like, because that actually is what it looks like. And before I even started, what drew me in, one of the other SAs came up to me and went, "Steve," and I hadn't started yet. This is like 5 days before I started, and we were at a conference. He's like, "Come look at this." I'm like, all right, I'm going to end the show here. And yeah, and there it is. Everything we do. There's our CSP. There's the construction of Cube Hunter. There's my little world there, where I can build. I can at a push of a button, I can spin up AWS, AKS, GCP. I can put Kubernetes into it. I can launch Aqua. I can deploy applications. At a push of a button, I can destroy those applications and launch another one and do any version of Aqua ever released, ever. And it takes me about 10 minutes. So in that sense, if you could deploy demos at that speed and create and destroy and it's all real, that in a sense is the beautiful Rube Goldberg machine. Everything goes through this. Finding anything in here or working out where the zap happens, that's not easy to do. Brent knows how it works. We rely heavily on him. But it is pretty awesome. I don't know if I'm still connected to it. Let's see if I actually click on something and destroy the world. We use Microsoft. What a surprise, we use Microsoft to log in. So this is another example of different create demo environment, and this is just with parameters, ask me anything I want to do anywhere in the world, and poof, it's up. Test Drive is a version of our product which is fully deployed. It's not a SaaS version. It's just something I can knock up, send you an email, and you have access for a very short amount of time to try and break it. But these are all really cool things that we can do. And I just kind of wanted to show you this sort of wonderful world that has been created that is kind of on the edge of a cliff at the same time, and give you a real world perspective on startups in a mad attempt to get everything running in an automation world where you could probably think of several ways that we could potentially do all this a little better. But it's cool and it works. I'll mention integrations as well. This is another little conjuring of our by Brent. The guy's amazing. I mean, this is our integration lab. So these are all the things we have up and running, where I can sit and play with our tool and integrate them, spin them up, and destroy them. What's weird is that we use hardly any of these tools. But it's interesting as an SA, I get to play with it. And again, it's all there. What's also nice, and I don't know, you guys who work for companies, how much access we get. I can see any environment that's been spun up. I can see how much we're paying for it. I'm not clicking that. But everything is there. I can see any escalation for any customers. I have like total access. So in a way, what I'm doing right now is in fact a massive security risk.
Someone pick his laptop quick. Look, I'm with the SA. Disconnected Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah, you guys are probably hacking me right now. Thanks. So it is interesting. This is today when we are doing our build. 4.5 is coming out soon, and you could see all the different builds of that spinning away and happening. Now we'll add, we do outsource. We have third-party pen tests. We do it every year. It's part of SOC 2 compliance. We have to. We almost always find little things, and we have to do something about them. With Jane's permission, I popped this text message we got up last week. Give me a nod. Good. This was from somebody who's POCing us at the moment. But it's good. We do pen test, and when other pen test, things generally go well. That was very, very good news. The pen test results from last year, again, these are out of date, but only had 4 things. You might argue with our mitigation. Talk to me afterwards about whether you agree with what's written there. But the reality is we do not deploy as a SaaS product. We always deploy inside, locally, within your application, which completely changes the risk profile of what we're trying to do. It doesn't stop them from pointing them out and rating them, but we try and describe why things are the way they are. How am I doing? 7:37. Hold on, a little dry. Okay. So that's kind of a whirlwind look at what we have. There's not a lot of extra, and there are some definite things missing that I didn't go through, and it's not because I didn't want to tell you about them. It's because they're not there. So I would like to ask the audience, is there anything you think we could do better? And really, I know that's the rest of the night blown, right? There are other speakers that are going to come after. I'm curious about that, but I will give away a few. We don't have any sort of SIM tool. We have Splunk, it's in our integration lab, but we don't actually have it active. There are pieces of it around, but not a centralized one. Interesting. That's on the roadmap, I was reliably told. We don't have vulnerability management like I think there's something with thread fix, things like that were mentioned earlier that people use to aggregate different vulnerabilities. The reality is our developer community is so small that things happen to the week and they actually go, here, go fix that. Like it's like paper at the moment. It's not printed out, but you know what I mean. It's actually so, I don't want to call it like university startup, but it still is like that. And this is part of the reason why they didn't want to tell me to tell you, because it needs to scale, and they know that. They haven't got the things in place, and they haven't made it happen. There's a real design around that happening. If I did this talk next year, it'd be very different. And so I'm going to end with this sort of earth-shattering potential thing to think about. I would suggest sometimes we have a shift-left obsession that makes us push almost toward compliance. We want to shift left, and we speak to people who are so obsessed with image scanning that they've missed the fact that actually our runtime controls that completely limit what anything can be exploited. If I were to recommend, I would say do that first, and then do your image scanning. But people actually will deploy Aqua and not do any of the runtime stuff for like a year, but only do the image scanning first. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. That's more of an understanding of what the capabilities of what we can do and not really getting that, or an overwhelming push to say you're shifting left. I'm not sure which one it is, but I'm just kind of throwing that food for thought out at you guys. And with that, I'm going to back up and lift that up. Thanks, Michael. Thank you, everybody.